Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Display Line podcast. I'm your host, Ollie,
And I'm your other host, Joey.
and today we're going to be taking you through recent takeoff of Thursday announcements, space news, especially Artemis, and all the events around that. So, we're going to start off with our large news section this week, which we're going to breeze by. So, Joey, do you want to start taking us through the Iranian war?
Yeah, so it's been quite the eventful week in Iran and the Middle East lately. There has been several US Air Force aircraft damaged, especially three KC-135s and one E-3 Sentry, which, based on the pictures we've seen, has been basically completely destroyed. It seems like this was a very precise missile strike that hit the radar dome on top of the E-3 Sentry, basically dead on. This was at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, which is hosting many US Air Force aircraft, and it's quite a problem that the missile was able to get through because they still have several E-3 Sentries at the airbase, and with them costing $700 million each, that could be quite a problem for the US.
Yeah, now I do believe this is the first recorded E3 combat loss, and I believe this is only the third ever loss, the other two being due to crashes. I can't fully confirm that, but I believe that is what I saw.
Yeah, there has been, I believe it was three losses non-combat related. There was an overrun at a runway, which caused a total loss of the aircraft. There was a crash in the past, and there was, I think, another crash somewhere. But there's been three losses non-combat related, and this is the first combat related loss.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate to hear, as it is a beautiful aircraft. It will be retired soon, anyway, as it is a very old aircraft. And most places, especially European countries, have retired it already. So it is coming to the end of its service life. And to be fair, it has a very good combat record, with only one being lost in combat and only three crashes, which is actually quite good for a plane like this. As, most military planes will have a lot of losses. The C-130, for example, that's had many crashes over the years. Granted, there is more of them. However, just because there's more does not mean that they're more likely to crash. It's sort of, yeah, I just think it's really impressive that there's only been four total lost.
Yeah, this is obviously isn't the only aircraft that have been lost during the war in the last week. There's been a few Reaper drones as well. They have lost over a dozen of these at this point, but they have quite a few of them to use. And since they stay over the airspace for such a long amount of time, it's no surprise that Iran has been able to shoot a few of them down. But over the last week or so, there has been several Reaper drones shot down.
Yeah, and they have also lost upwards of 10 KC-135s throughout the course of this war due to crashes or the drone strikes or missile strikes at Prince Sultan Air Base. But we're going to quickly move on to something more brighter in the Iranian news, which is the UK's Typhoons and air defences have shot upwards of 100 drones heading towards RAF Akrotiri. And that is quite the achievement, considering the fact there's only, about 10 aircraft based at Akrotiri, with more going over there at the moment, like the Wildcat helicopters on the from the Royal Navy. So 100 drones going towards RAF Akrotiri that are being shot down. That is huge. Now, while the missiles themselves that will be used to shoot them down might cost millions of pounds, millions of dollars, shooting at these drones down that make cost only 100 quid to produce saves those infrastructure that cost even more than the missile being damaged. So if you hit a Typhoon and make it unserviceable, that's like 40 times the cost, at least, of a missile that's going to take down one drone.
Yeah, and the Ministry of Defense has put out a tweet saying that multiple different pilots that are operating these aircraft have achieved ace pilot status, which was given to pilots in World War II when they had shot down five or more aircraft. While these aren't piloted aircraft and they're following a set designated route, there has been multiple pilots that have achieved this ace pilot status for shooting down five or more.
Yeah, now we are on the topic of drones. So an F-15 has tried shooting down a Shahed drone with guns only. Now I believe it did miss. From the videos that we can see, it didn't shoot it down. There has been two POVs that I found. I don't know if Joe's found any more, but it is very hard to shoot down these drones. It's moving at 1/10 of the speed that an F-15 would usually travel at. So it's, you can see in the video. We'll put them up on the screen how they are. The F-15 has to like very sharply turn just to even try and stay with this drone. So yeah, it's very interesting to see gunning tactics going into this war.
Yeah, and I suppose they'll be doing that to save on the missiles, which cost tens, if not hundreds of times more than these drones. So it is very efficient to use guns instead, but also much more difficult.
Now, talking about F-15s, the F-15s that were lost in Kuwait a few weeks ago, the pilots are all safe and they are now back flying in new fighter jets. So that is really, really good news to hear that the pilots are all okay and they are back flying again. That is such an achievement and not something that you'd think would be happening a few weeks after they ejected out of an aircraft. Now, ejecting can be very lethal at times. Now, the new ejector seats are a lot safer. They're a lot more, But if you watch Top Gun Maverick, no, not Top Gun Maverick, the first Top Gun, just Top Gun, you'd see that just ejecting the canopy can be very dangerous, as you saw um, Goose, that's it, die unfortunately when he ejected into the canopy. But luckily they are a lot more safer now. However, when you are ejecting the actual seat itself, you can pull so many G's at a very rapid pace, and that can give you permanent back damage and bones damage.
Yeah, I believe they pull upwards of 15 Gs, but it is only for a few seconds, which is why it's mostly safe for these pilots to do. But your spine is compressing at 15 times your body weight, which can cause some spinal issues, which you don't really want as a fighter pilot when you need to be in tip-top condition and perfect fitness and health.
Yeah, and we spoke many times about Gs, especially with the aerobatic side of that. And now, while 15G is only for a couple of seconds, those couple of seconds can, or milliseconds, can genuinely determine the rest of your life and whether you'll be going back into combat or not. The human body isn't really supposed to push past about 4 or 5Gs. The aerobatic pilots can push more up to 10Gs with intense training, especially things like aerobatic pilots, fighter pilots, and space crew. However, 15G is over 5G over that sort of 10G limit that you really want to be maximum pulling. So yeah, it can be very dangerous, and ejecting is sort of a very last minute thing that, or not very last minute, but a very last resort that you want to be doing. So, as we move on, there has been airlines or airliners destroyed at Mehrabad Airport. Now, we don't have much news to report about this. However, there has been multiple pictures and videos from the airport showing upwards of 5 to 10, if not 15, 20 airliners being destroyed. Now, this is a very big shame to see. Especially as airliners got nothing to do with this. Most of them will probably have been grounded as well due to this war. So it's something that is going to cost a lot of money towards the airlines, and it's very unfortunate to see.
Yeah, just looking at some of the pictures, I can already tell that most of these, if not all of them, will be total losses to the airliners. And that's just not something that they want us to be involved in, but it's just, I suppose, when you're in a war zone, that can happen, and it does happen.
Yeah, it is incredibly unfortunate, and it will cost all the airlines a lot of money. And if me and Joey can see any airlines, we will put the list of names up on the side of the screen now of any airliners that we can see with any confirmed losses. As we move on, though, another plane has been destroyed, this time from the Iraqi Air Force with an AN-32B, which was damaged in the recent attack on Baghdad International Airport. So Iraq does not have the biggest of air forces, so even one plane like this, I mean, this is a very expensive plane in the first, point. But any loss is catastrophic to the Air Force, as it is a very small Air Force, just like Iran's Air Force. That's not is It might be big, but it's got very old planes, very expensive, or maybe even impossible to repair, like the F-14 Tomcat.
Yeah, you look at the air forces like the US or even the UK, and one aircraft loss is it's a big deal, but it's not a big hit to the air force capabilities. I mean, you look at the US in just this war, they've lost over a dozen Reaper drones, nearly 10 plus KC-135s and E3 Sentry, and they're still going. They're still sending aircraft. They are still, um, I don't want to say winning because there's no winning in war, but they are still fighting for that air superiority over Iran, and they're still going for it. But a hit to an air force with not many planes could cause major issues.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of the US sending planes, A-10 Warthogs have arrived at RAF Lakenheath. From the US, and I'll find out what airbase and put that up on the screen. So they have travelled across just like the F-22 Raptors, which are still there. There are still some F-22 Raptors there from the pictures that I've been able to see. and the A-10s have now joined them. And I assume they will also be going across to the Middle East at some point after maybe training or refueling and things like that. I know that there've been some of my mates like Alf. He's been keeping up to date with all of that, so I might have to ask him some questions about what they're actually doing there.
Yeah, as for the F-22s, I have seen some people saying that 6 of them have departed RF Lakenheath, and there is only 6 left. We have no idea where they have gone, but from what I am hearing from the people who are around the area and who frequent the airbase, there is only 6 left there. But there is now over a dozen A-10 Warthogs there, and they are doing routine trainings. I saw some clips of them taking off and landing, so they're just preparing themselves, having a little break from the long transit ahead of the next long transit to the Middle East.
Yeah, and I believe this is one of the first times the A-10s have ever been in the UK for military purposes. It's not something that we saw last time when the first sort of Iranian war happened last year with the F-22s coming over. The A-10s didn't. However, because this is a sort of it's not a full-scale invasion, but it is a very high military operation. So they are starting to send more of these. The A-10s are retiring actually at the end of the next few years. They are being retired as we speak. So yeah, it's very very cool, and me and Joey might never ever be able to see an A-10 flying, as we don't live that near to RF Lakenheath, and obviously they're being retired, and they're not even that common in the US as they are being retired, and the display team that they used to have, or demo team in America, is also gone.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned retirement because they were actually scheduled to retire this year at some point. They were already in the process of retirement, but that was supposed to end and be fully retired this year. But I have a feeling that because right now they're being used in combat, they might not retire this year. It might be pushed back a year or maybe even a few years.
Yeah, now speaking of the A-10, just quickly before we move on to the Ukrainian sort of side of this and the final bit of the Iranian news, the A-10 actually has a very high friendly fire ratio. So on the side of all the A-10, well, a lot of A-10s, you'll see lots of sort of roundels and things. Well, not roundels, sort of stickers and stuff like that of the tally of what planes they've killed, and on some of them, I'm sure we'll find the picture. There is an F-22 on there, and I believe an F-16 as well. So yeah, it's quite funny that I guess they joke around and say that they've killed these aircraft. And the F-22, I believe, was in a training mission, which is the F-22 has been beaten by a lot of aircraft in training missions, actually, including the Rafale, the Typhoon. Those both have defeated it. I believe the F-35 has as well. F-16, and yeah, I don't want to get on too much of a tangent here, but people say that the F-22 is bad because it's lost to an A-10 and a Rafale and all these, but it's a training mission and they're going to be in different types of scenarios, and the F-22 pilot might be told not to do pull aggressive maneuvers. And don't forget, the F-22 is also designed to be a stealth aircraft, not really supposed to be a dogfighting aircraft. It's something that's supposed to stay well away, launch all its missiles, and turn home before the missiles have even really left the aircraft bay.
Yeah, it's quite the impressive aircraft, and these other aircraft that have quote unquote beaten it in these training missions are also very impressive. But at the end of the day, you have to remember that it's a training mission, and it's not always going to be that in the real world. If I'm sure if an F-22 came up against any of those aircraft in the real world, chances are it'll go very different. They might not even get a chance to see the F-22 before they get alarms on their dashboards or anything. But it's going to be quite an interesting one to follow along with this war to see if the F-22s do start getting more of it involved and see videos for surfacing from in Iran of these F-22s being involved.
Yeah, so we're going to move on to the final bit of the Iranian war here, which is the news that Spain and France have blocked most US flights and Israeli military flights, sorry, I should specify, over their airspace. Spain has fully blocked any US operations from its air bases and its airspace. However, France has only blocked certain US and Israeli cargo mainly, so mainly weapons from the US to Israel. So basically, all this means is so they can land in the UK, but they're gonna have to go around Spain and France. They're gonna have to go basically the very long way around, and just a lot more fuel costs, a lot more of everything cost, and yeah, and a lot of other Europe, countries have blocked them. So just mainly Spain and France at the moment. But yeah, it's just because a lot of these countries don't want to get into the war or be specified as being in the war. So they've just blocked any US and Israeli cargo, and Spain has completely closed it off to any US and Israeli operations.
Yeah, moving sort of, well, only half onto the Ukraine war because this is still part of the Iran war, I guess. A few weeks ago, or a week or two ago, um, Ukraine sent 200 drone experts to the Middle East to help the US in taking down drones more effectively using their own interceptor drones. And there is now videos of these interceptor drones hitting Shahed drones, and this is one of the first times we've seen uh, good video of drones intercepting other drones in a war scenario from the ground.
Now, actually, speaking of drones, now there's a lot of drone talk in these wars. So, speaking of that, there have been videos of a Russian drone skewering another Ukrainian drone. So, there is a video that will pop up on the screen, as long as it's not copyrighted and we have got like permission and all that. And there has also been one of a Ukrainian drone shotgunning a Russian drone, which we'll also try and put a video up, or at least a picture up of this. So yeah, it's they're adding everything to these drones now. So the Russian one had basically a very long iron rod that was just very hot and sort of just dug it in and it just burnt the drone up, and that gone. And then obviously the one with the Ukraine, they've just added a shotgun on the bottom of it and blew up the drone in front of them. So it's quite funny seeing these new inventions, like I said last week, of everything they're doing with drone warfare, because it obviously started off with FPV drones with, sort of fuses on the bottom of them, and now we're going to drones with shotguns and massive iron rods on the bottom of them.
I suppose it really shows the advancements in warfare. I mean, just this news segment, the amount of times we've mentioned drones, you go back 10, 15 years, there wouldn't be much mention of drones, maybe surveillance drones, but none of this drones being on the front lines, being used for combat missions. But it's just all the talk now. It's just all drones, drones, and drones.
Yeah, and honestly, it's kind of crazy because they only cost, well, most of these FPV drones only cost, 100 quid to make. Maybe add a bit more onto that with the warheads that get put on it. So it's such a cheap alternative to things that could put the operator's life rather than human life in danger. Because tanks and things like that, that's going to put both crews at risk of being killed or injured in combat, and it's not something that combat in itself is not something that me and Joey personally want to see at all. It's not a very nice thing, really, to talk about either, and it's not something that me and Joey had planned talking about going into this podcast. But we think it's really important to add this section in to educate people on advancements and our opinions, not political opinions, just literally just our opinions on these new inventions and sort of how these wars are going on.
Yeah, we were originally not going to talk about any wars. That's why we held off so long talking about Ukraine, because all the stuff going on there is just constant and constant. And because it's been going on for so long, it's just not popping up in the news as much, which is why we don't have a whole lot of news typically on Ukraine. But we started talking about the Iran war quite a lot as it happened because, well, it was just all over the news.
Yeah.
It was actually blocking a lot of the news that was just normal aviation news, so it was kind of hard to ignore it because it was all anyone was talking about. And since it's got a lot of aviation related news to it, we figured we'd include it because it's just quite important to know about.
Yeah, it is really important to know about. However, it's quite hard to talk about without getting political, which is why we try and keep it to a very sort of bare minimum level, sort of a very standard, non-political, just the news sort of side, and with a slight bit of our opinions. Like we said, it's cool to see these drones being used and the advancements in war, but obviously we don't agree with this war. But yeah, it's really important to learn about and educate people on it because all the news, so BBC News won't cover all of the news we cover. We won't cover all the news BBC News covers, but we sort of grab the most important things that we can find from all the different news channels and put it into one. So yeah, we hope you really do enjoy this important segment and learn and be educated a bit more about war and all these advancements and stuff like that. And the reason also we hold off on the Ukraine war is because it's very brutal. Now, I'm not saying the Iran war isn't, but there's a lot of civilian casualties, especially in Russia. Oh, sorry, in the Ukrainian war in Ukraine, and it's not something that's very nice to talk about. So we try and steer clear of that sort of civilian casualty side, and more stick to So the drone and aviation side.
Yeah, and sort of speaking of the drone and aviation side, an Su-34 from Russia has been shot down by Ukrainian air defenses, and the Su-34 is worth 34 million US dollars. So this is quite the big loss for Russia. I know they've lost at this point probably hundreds of aircraft during this war. It's been going on since 2022.
Yeah,
I've been sort of keeping a little bit of track of it the entire time. I remember when it started, I was on a call with my cousin. I think I mentioned that in the last
yeah, you
episode.
did, yeah.
But I've been keeping track of it the sort of the whole time, and they have lost both sides have lost a lot of aircraft. So it's crazy to see that the Su-34s are still getting shot down because this must be happening fairly rarely if they're still going at this point. They can't be doing this every single day.
Yeah, I mean, both sides have lost many, many aircraft, many tanks, many armored vehicles, many just everything. And it's just crazy to see every few weeks you'll see Russian reports come out of these aircraft, really expensive aircraft, like the Su-34 being shot down, like the Su-27 getting shot down, and the AN-225 has been destroyed in this war as well. So the biggest aircraft that was ever actually made and flying, the AN-225. It was based in a Ukrainian hangar. However, I believe Russia just found it out and then was able to successfully carry out a bombing mission or a strike mission on the target on the target of the AN-225. And it's a shame to see all these really cool, expensive, sort of one of one aircraft like the AN-225 be destroyed. Now there are plans to at least rebuild the AN-225, whether it will be flying again or if it will just be sort of on the ground is a different matter. But there are plans to rebuild this aircraft.
Yeah, there's been quite a few aircraft from Antonov that have been destroyed in this war so far, and there was one in the last week that was on the Russian side of the war, Russian AN-26 military plane that did crash near Crimea, and this has had 29 casualties, which is not what you want to see. And I believe most of those casualties, if not all of them, were from crew and passengers on the plane.
Yeah, and it is really a big shame to see all these crashes. I mean, there is a lot of fatalities actually in the last few weeks. From that Bolivian crash last week that killed at least 66. This one killing 29, and it's just such a shame to see all these crashes, especially of these rare aircraft from Antonov, especially as there's not too many of them left nowadays. But in other crash news, unfortunately, an F-35 has crashed uh, in the Nevada airport region. It was, I believe, doing training missions. However, this is a very undisclosed sort of thing of what was going on. We just have reports coming out that an F-35 has crashed, with the pilot being reported with minimal injuries.
Yeah, Nevada is known for its sort of aircraft testing. It's very wide, very open. There is no one nearby. I mean, Area 51 is there. There's a lot we could say about Area 51, but at the end of the day, it's just a training site for aircraft, including the F-35, which very much could be where this was taking off from. But it's unknown at the minute. There's not a lot of details, and if it was from Area 51, the chances are we're not going to hear about that for a long time, if ever.
Yeah, and a lot of aircraft, if not all aircraft that go into US production and service, will have been tested at Area 51 at some point of their production, manufacturing, engineering life, as mainly prototypes. So I know the F-22 and the YF-23, which the YF-23 being the unused version of the F-22, meaning it was the competitor that never got actually fully developed, as the F-22 did win that contract. So yeah, all these aircraft will especially the newer stealth models like the F-35, F-22. These will be tested at Area 51, but because it's these was in a training mission somewhere in Nevada, it is very undisclosed, and there's really not a lot that we can talk about other than the unfortunate fact that we have lost an F-35. One of my mates did bring up how common the F-35 crashing is, and I said it's a it's a training mission, training exercise. We don't know what happened, we don't know how it happened, and especially if the pilot was doing like G testing or doing the stress testing on the aircraft or something that pushes the aircraft to its limits, that could be why the plane crashed. As Obviously, it's not something that they want to happen, but if it does happen, they can sort of learn going forward of the stress limit, the turn radius, the speed, all these different factors they can learn from these crashes. Now, it is a very expensive crash, I'll give them that, but yeah, it's definitely valuable data if that is what was going on.
Yeah, I know Area 51 is used for a lot of experimental testing that could possibly cause issues. They want to find that out, and unfortunately, right now, the only way to find that out is to fly the aircraft. I'm sure they could do unmanned flights, but that would be a lot of effort and a lot of changing parts of the aircraft, a lot of like software updates and stuff. So as of right now, for most experimental updates and changes, they will just do manned flights from test pilots. This very much could be what happened. It might not be. We actually don't know yet.
Yeah, now moving on to the next part of our news, coming to the end of our news section now, which is good. We are keeping it lower this time instead of going off on lots of tangents like last week. There's been a red sandstorm that swept through places like Crete, Greece, and Libya, with a separate one also happening all the way over in Australia. So the sky has literally the whole, all you can see is red. It genuinely looks like something you'd see in a nightmare. It's something that was like, whoa. I thought it was AI because there's a lot of these AIs coming out now. So you wait until you can see it from these trusted sources, and I was like, just wow. It's honestly something that you just think that you'd wake up in a nightmare and see.
Now, the videos of this are absolutely terrifying, and if we can find one or even just a picture, we'll put it up on screen. There is no filter added to that. That is what it actually looked like in these places. And this was related to a 1,000-mile wide dust or sandstorm that went across North and Northwest Africa, which is currently still, at the time of recording this, going across Africa. It's now over the ocean as well. It went over a few islands as well. You could see just the way that dust and clouds and stuff flow in the atmosphere just because of this dust swirling around all over it. It was definitely one of the most impressive sandstorms I've ever seen. But actually, it's definitely the most impressive sandstorm that I have ever seen.
Yeah, I completely agree. But we do have to move on to the end of our section here. So the last thing we have is an interesting glitch in America, where a fake line of supercells and storms popped up on radar. So there isn't
Yeah,
too
this
much to know
was.
about this, which I was about to say. Yeah. So I was going to say there's not
Yeah.
much to know about this, but Joey brought this to me. So Joey, do you want to take us through about what really happened?
Yeah, so there was a little bit of an outbreak. I won't say outbreak, but there was a couple storms popping up the other day. At the time of recording this, it was like 4 days ago, 3, 4 days ago, and on radar, on all the radars, or not all the radars, but on a lot of the radars, a 100-mile plus long line of supercells popped up. And if you don't know, a supercell is just a type of storm that tornadoes are typically associated with. But to have a radar glitch like this is the first time that something that extreme has happened. You get radar glitches occasionally with maybe even just like 1 or 2 pixels on the radar coming up as something, even though there's nothing there. Or sometimes there's something called a hail spike, which is just where hail is blocking the radar, so there's a spike on the radar. But something like this is just quite insane. There's a lot of people on the weather side of Twitter sort of laughing about it, saying this is crazy that this even happened, and just wondering how that even happened.
Yeah, it is a bit wild to be fair, and it's not something that, that I imagine really seeing this week. So, yeah, an interesting way to end our news segment. So we're going to move very swiftly on to our main topic for this week, which is the Artemis II mission and all of the space news that's going on. Just a quick sort of note here: there will not be a podcast next week that we do want to add here, because Joey is on a holiday in Spain, so we will be missing next week. However, there may still be promos going out. Hopefully, there might be still be promos going out, just sort of discussing what we will be talking about in the week after that episode. So we do just want to put that in a quick note here before we move on to the next segment.
Yep, so this is sort of leading space news into the name of the episode, To the Moon. The space news for this week is Artemis II. Pretty much everyone's heard of it by now. There was I think around 5 million plus people watching from multiple different platforms just on NASA's official live streams. I know there was 2.8 million watching on YouTube. There was 2.7 million watching on Twitter, and it was one of the most viewed live streams of the last sort of 10 years plus. Um, and what is Artemis II? It's the mission to return to the moon, hence the name To the Moon for the episode. And Artemis II is the second in the series. Artemis 1 was just Earth orbit to test the Orion spacecraft, which is the bit at the very top of the rocket, which is where the humans are. And it's not the biggest of areas, it's a 9 meters cubed space for them to live for the next couple days or longer than that on more longer duration space missions. And Artemis 2 is the first one to have crew in it, and it is the first manned mission to go beyond low Earth orbit since the 1970s. This is the first one in 53, 54 years, and it's a very exciting time for anyone, even just anyone, not just involved in space or integrated into that community, but just anyone in general. We're going back to the moon within the next 5, 10 years, possibly, and it's I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so I have got a lot of questions here that I picked out of some of the live stream chats that I saw there, some from my friends and family, and some personally on my own. So we're going to kick it off. So, how long will they be orbiting the Earth before they go to the moon? Now, this is a very interesting question. It's something that I got asked yesterday, which Joey educated me about. So I think it's something that's I think this is probably the most crucial question. So let's get that out of the way first.
So Artemis 2 will be, well, say Artemis 2, Artemis 2 is the whole mission. It is called Orion. The Orion spacecraft, which is, as I mentioned before, the bit on the top, will be orbiting Earth until, at the time of recording this, tonight, which is just roughly 24 hours after the launch, because it will do something called a TLI burn, which is a translunar injection burn, which will actually send it towards the moon. Right now, it is currently in Earth orbit, and they need to do a fairly long burn, which is just the ignition of the engine and keeping it on for a certain amount of time. That is called a burn. And this burn in particular, which will be tonight, and I'll be watching this, will take them onto a course to go in front of the moon, which will then pull them back, and that will send them on a trajectory that will just land back at Earth. So they do not have to use the engines to get back. As soon as they've done this TLI burn, they will be on a trajectory that will take them back to landing at Earth.
So, how long will this entire journey take overall? Maybe split it up into stages. So, how long will it orbit? How long will it take to get to the moon? How long will it be about around the moon for? And how long will it take to get back? And then how long it will take in total?
Yeah, so it's quite an interesting question because it's not really a straightforward answer because it all depends on the variables. Like if this TLI burn goes even 1 second longer than its like main duration, it will be vastly different because you're talking minor adjustments making major changes to your trajectory when you're talking about these distances of up to 400,000 kilometers. But overall, it should take about 10 days, and they will be at the moon between sort of 4 and 6 days from now. They will be around the moon, and then the rest of that is basically falling back to Earth. And they get the closest approach to the moon. I can't remember exactly. It's either 4 or 6 days. I believe it's 6 days from now. They get the closest approach to the moon, and it's gonna be incredible to see some of the pictures they get.
Yeah, no, that I mean that is really awesome. But do you want to just quickly tell us how do they get astronauts back to the Earth safely? Do you want to just quickly? It's something that you wouldn't really think. Yeah, well, I mean, how are they going to land? You know, it's not like the Elon Musk rockets that can now be caught within the little tower thing. So how do they get them safely back to Earth?
Yeah, so Artemis 2 on the Orion spacecraft has parachutes. It will re-enter Earth's atmosphere using its heat shield, and that will sort of just uh, mitigate all the increased temperatures from re-entry because it is going at tens of thousands of miles an hour through the atmosphere. That's going to cause quite a lot of heat from compression and friction in the order of thousands of degrees Celsius. So they have that heat shield to protect them while they decelerate. And then once they're basically in free fall, some drogue chutes will deploy, which will just help them slow down a little bit more. And it will also sort of keep them on track in a straight drop. And then once those have sort of done their job, you'll see the main parachutes deploy, which will lower them at a relatively low speed. And by that I mean a few meters per second. So it's still uh, sort of quick, maybe possibly uncomfortable landing, but in the water, it's known as a soft splashdown, even at those speeds. So that's how they will get them back safely. And I will definitely be there watching the live stream. Even if I'm not here, I'll be in Spain at the time. And no matter the time, I'll be watching it.
So my next question is going to be: do you know where they'll be landing? Obviously, it'll be in the ocean somewhere, as that's the sort of easiest landing place for it to be. But do you know where in the ocean, which ocean, and how will they be picked up? Will there be a big boat that goes out? Will it be sort of like a little police boat? Do NASA have their own boats?
So NASA owns a sort of fleet of ships that they use for crew landings from the ISS and Artemis II. Artemis II will be splashing down in the Pacific Ocean, as it is sort of the easiest place to land for them, and it's near America, so that'll be where they land, and then they'll get some ships out there to pick them up, and they'll be quarantined, which is just something they do after every lunar mission, which they did for Apollo missions, just in case, because they didn't know if there was any microbial life on the moon. But it's just something they still do, just to sort of acclimatize the crew back to being in the atmosphere, being in gravity, because sometimes it can affect the physical health being in. It's called microgravity because technically, if you're on the ISS, it's not zero gravity. It's actually just continuous free fall, which is called microgravity. But it essentially is the same thing, and that can cause physical problems. So a lot of astronauts will actually be in wheelchairs when they get back. But for this 10-day mission, I imagine they'll be just straight back up on their feet just hours after splashdown and being picked up.
And just quickly before we move on to one of the main questions of this, why do astronauts do you know when they go up in the ISS and they throw things around or whatever, when they come back to Earth, they'll sort of forget that they're holding something. Is that something to do with the brain? Is that something to do with just they forget? Is it like what sort of the science behind them just sort of dropping things randomly and not realizing?
Yeah, so that is funny you say that. There is a video of, I can't remember which astronaut, I think it was Chris Hadfield. He was talking during an interview and he placed his pen there and
Which is
dropped
yeah,
it
which is where I'm
several
coming this
times.
question from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, this is just because of how long they spend on the ISS. Imagine you spend 6 months plus of your life somewhere where you can do that. You come back down and like a week later you're being interviewed. You might just forget it. Although I'm sure some of those probably are skids. I can imagine a lot of them do forget sometimes and do drop things just expecting it to start floating.
Yeah, no, that's just it's just a sort of funny thing that I thought of sort of on the spot there, considering that you sort of brought up this microgravity and all that sort of stuff. So it's just something that I thought we'd add on before this question, which is what is the purpose of this mission?
So Artemis is overall, its mission is to establish a permanent moon base. Now, I know that some people were like, why didn't they do that during the Apollo days? They just didn't have the technology to do that back then. They could bring 45 tons to the moon each mission, and each mission was costing them, in today's money, billions of dollars, and they just didn't have the technology to do that. They were running on less computing power than is in even your phone. Your phone right now has thousands of times more computing power than the Saturn V rocket that they were doing with Apollo. So Artemis is the mission to establish a permanent moon base with rovers, habitation modules, and just so that we can establish a permanent presence on the moon with always at least one person there. Artemis 1 was, I think I said earlier, it was Earth orbit. It wasn't. It was a lunar flyby with no people in it, and that encountered a few issues. So they're now doing Artemis 2, which is um, a crewed lunar flyby. They've fixed some of the issues. They've had some issues, but they've fixed the main issues that they had with Artemis 1, and that is doing a crewed lunar flyby for the first time in 54 years. Humans are going to the moon. I've seen some people say it's not technically to the moon because they're not landing on it, but not only are they going for like 300 times further than any human has in the last 54 years, but they are also going further than any human has ever, because as they go behind the moon, they will actually break the record for the furthest humans from Earth by roughly 2,000 kilometers. I think they'll reach around 402,000 kilometers. from Earth and 432,000 kilometers from Earth, I believe, and that will break the record for the furthest a human has ever gone from Earth. And to say that that is not to the moon, I think is a bit downplaying the achievements that this is really doing.
And the biggest question, and you may think a bit illogical, but I mean, it's just something that's not well known. So, why did it take 54 years to actually get a crewed mission to at least go around the moon, if not to the moon?
Yeah, so I see this question brought up a lot by, especially by conspiracy theorists, but we'll ignore them for now because that's another topic to talk about. But it did take 54 years to do this, and the reason is there's no political reason to do it until now. And that's sort of what even the new NASA administrator, Jared Isaacman, was saying during the press conference just after the launch. This question sort of got brought up to him, just worded differently. And the reason that we did it back then in the 1960s is because of the space race. There was economical and a political reason to do it, so they did it. And now there is China wanting to establish a permanent moon base, so they're doing it now. And there's also the economical factors as well to play into this. Back in the Apollo days, NASA had between 4 and 5% of the entire US annual budget dedicated to their missions, and now they get 0.5%, which is just a tenth of what they were getting back then. Although the technology has advanced and you can definitely get it cheaper, it's still not cheap to make a rocket. Artemis II is costing billions of dollars, and it's just not really sustainable. I'm sure because there's now a political reason to do it, it's now a race. I'm sure NASA will get an increased budget until this is done, and then I'm sure once it's done, the budget will be decreased again. But that's just because of how the world works, unfortunately. If we wanted to go back to the moon and maybe even Mars in the next 5 years with people, we could, but there's no economical reason to do it, so countries won't give that budget to NASA.
Yeah, and that really clears it up, I think, quite interestingly there. And I think that that gives people a reasonable answer. Now, I'm not sure how many people are going to be watching this podcast, but we really do hope. If the one thing we do want you to take away from this podcast, I know last week we were talking about what we want you to take from that one. This is sort of that question and response there is the one thing we want you to take away from this podcast today. Is it's sort of the most asked question, something that really does need to be answered professionally. And I know Joey isn't a space, an actual NASA science expert, but he is, as close as you're going to get outside of NASA. So it's really cool that he can answer that for a lot of people or whoever's watching this today. So Artemis 1 was just a sort of lunar, sort of unmanned lunar sort of mission. This one is a manned lunar mission that's going to go around the moon and back. So, which Artemis will actually put humans on the moon?
That will be Artemis 4 because the Artemis 3 mission was originally scheduled to do that, but since the mission trajectory, I think is what they refer to it as, the mission trajectory and objectives has changed since the new NASA administrator Jared Isaacman got into his position. He has changed the Artemis 3 mission just to sort of increase that level of safety. They can do a bit more testing on Artemis 3. And then Artemis 4, which should hopefully be within the next 5 years. That is the ultimate goal. And I personally think they will achieve that. If not, that's definitely within the next 10 years, they will achieve that. We will have feet on the moon in the next 10 years, in my opinion, and in a lot of people's opinions, NASA employees included. And if there's anyone to believe on that, it is presumably NASA employees. But Artemis 4 will be the one that really steps foot back on the moon.
So, if Artemis 4 is the one that is actually putting people back on the moon, what is Artemis 3 for?
Now, that is a great question because it's sort of an interesting one. Even to me, I didn't expect them to change Artemis 3's goal to this. I don't think anyone did. But because the Orion spacecraft is not the lunar lander, it is just sort of the flyby aircraft. Just like in Apollo, they had an aircraft, a spacecraft orbiting the moon, and then one detached from that and went and landed, came back up and docked with it. The lunar lander has not technically been decided by NASA. They are getting a private company to make it for them. Everyone's pretty certain it's going to be SpaceX with the um, lunar lander that they're making, and I personally think it will be as well. SpaceX is making heavy improvements every single time they launch. They've launched their Starship rocket over a dozen times now. I'm pretty sure. I haven't really kept count since the last one. It's been a few months, but they are making heavy steps and heavy progress in this. They do most of NASA's missions now. They launched the Falcon 9 rocket, which carries people to the International Space Station. So it is really a trusted company by NASA, and I imagine that will be the lunar lander they go for, which is actually a lot bigger than the Orion spacecraft. If we can find a picture of them docking together, it'll be on the screen now. It's quite amusing to think that they are choosing to go in this small little spacecraft and then dock with the massive um, Starship lunar lander. And what they'll do on Artemis 3 is launch both of them separately on separate rockets, and then when they are in Earth orbit, they will practice docking together and undocking just to test that that works. I know it's a tried and tested method, that is the same exact mechanism that they do for the ISS, but it's just something they want to test before they send people off to the moon, because you don't want to be there and realize something's wrong. You want to test everything, and that's what Artemis 3's goal is.
Yeah, no, that's really cool, and I think that is very clear. Once again, it's cleared up what Artemis 3 will be doing and why they sort of moved on for the actual landing mission to Artemis 4. And I think, yeah, I mean, these days with the very high safety standards, I think that's probably the best way to go, especially as you get that little bit more training in. You get, you get the extra bits of the docking, as you said, all that sort of training in, and you get just a little bit more experience before you actually go back to landing on the moon. So will it be the same astronauts that go to the moon, or will it be completely different ones? Will these astronauts go on Artemis 3? Will it just be a completely new set of people every time?
So it's currently unknown as to whether the Artemis 4 crew will be the Artemis 2 crew, and whether the Artemis 3 crew will also be the Artemis 2 crew. I imagine it'll be different people for Artemis 4, but it is very possible that the Artemis 2 crew are the Artemis 4 crew because they have experience in the Orion spacecraft. They'll know what they're in for, they'll know how to handle anything if it goes wrong, and they're probably the best people to have for the Artemis 4 mission, so I would not be surprised if they are. But as of right now, I don't think there is any confirmation as to who is the Artemis 4 crew.
Yeah, so a great lead-on question from my mum here. So, how do you get picked to be an Artemis astronaut, and how do you actually train for this? So, I assume there'll be thousands of applicants trying to be an astronaut throughout NASA, other space companies, and things like that. So, how do you get picked, and how do you train for such an intense mission?
Yeah, so it's I don't even know what the word would be for this, but it's sort of like in Urshaw's display teams, like how they pick Red Arrow's pilots. They pick really the best of the astronauts, and then they sort of see what their expertise are. They always have at least one pilot for each mission, so they'll have a pilot. They'll pick the best of the best pilots. They'll pick the best of the best mission specialists for certain aspects of the mission, and it's quite the process to pick these people because there are thousands of astronauts and they have to pick just four.
Yeah.
And as for the training, they have done lots of training. They have done G training, but as every astronaut does, extensive G training. But specifically for the Artemis missions, the four astronauts did get familiar with the spacecraft. They have a mock-up Orion capsule, so they sort of look around the interior of that, get shown around what every button does, what everything does, what to look out for on the screens, because they have displays of all the tank pressures, temperatures, just in case anything goes wrong. They've got all the data they need, and they'll really familiarize themselves with all of that data, and then they'll be ready. They'll also do launch escape tower training. If you were looking really closely during the Artemis 2 launch, you'll have seen the escape baskets go off, which is what they have on the top of the crew access tower, which is the big tower next to the
Which
rocket,
we probably have a
that the
picture up on
crew,
screen for as well right now,
yeah,
so it's a good
yeah,
visual indicator as well.
yeah, the crew access tower is what the crew climb. Well, I say climb. They have an elevator nowadays, and they'll go up to the top of the rocket and get in. But they have an escape system built in, which is just a bunch of sort of sliding buckets that they can slide down, just in case while they're up there something goes wrong. And they'll do training for that as well. I know that some specific launch pads, they have a giant slide, but the basket does seem to be the best system to get as far away as quick as possible. So they'll do training on all of the possible scenarios, or the best ways to get out of those possible scenarios, and the best ways to handle them.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, and I think that's a great question from my mum there. So shout out, mum, for that brilliant question, and we hope that does answer that question for you. But one of our last question, probably our last question here, actually, as you already answered the other one that I had prepared here. So it was delayed many times actually, and what? So the question here is why was it delayed, and how did they fix the issues that were wrong with the rocket?
Yeah, so one of the major delays that they've had is due to a hydrogen leak, which is one of the hardest fuels to actually contain because it is the smallest element. It really squeezes through the smallest of gaps. It is really difficult to contain, and even NASA hasn't figured out 100% how to contain it effectively. Even during this mission, while it was on the pad, they lost roughly just under 1% of their fuel just from it escaping through all the gaps. But that was well within their limits of what they could handle. They expected this. But there was a few um, unexpected leaks over the last few months of hydrogen. They tried to do the launch previously and did some wet dress rehearsals, which I believe I explained
Yeah.
in one of the last episodes, and that really showed that they had some leaks to fix, and they fixed all the seals. Every single one of them had to be looked at and inspected and fixed, and that really fixed it. And as for the minor delay that they had on the launch day yesterday at the time of recording this, um, there was one or two issues that they had with the flight termination system, which, as scary as it sounds to explain it as explosives on the rocket, that is essentially what it is. They have a little panel on the side with explosives just in case the rocket veers off course and is heading towards people. They can detonate it from the ground, and they had a few communication issues with that system on the ground, so they had to fix those very quickly, which they did very quickly, but it did cause minor delays. They had one of the batteries in that exact same flight termination system actually above expected temperatures, but upon further inspection, it was actually the thermometer and temperature sensor that was actually causing the issue. So that was a very quick, easy fix. They just used a different temperature sensor. Um, and that was the only real major, well, minor delays that they had on the launch day. But it has been quite the long wait for Artemis II. I know that a lot of people in the space Twitter community, which is known as Spitter, very creative name from them there. A lot of the members of the Spitter community have been mocking the Artemis II mission just because of how long it has taken. But they are building one of the most powerful rockets ever built, and launching Crew. It's the most powerful rocket to ever launch Crew, and it's certainly um, it's a flight test. At the end of the day, things can go wrong, things will go wrong, and they need to learn from it.
Yeah, so my final question that I can think of right now, as of the time literally right now, is so sort of moving slightly off of Artemis, more into just the rocket side. So what are space shuttles for? And what is there any plans to bring back any space shuttle missions? And sort of like what's the difference between just having a rocket go around the Earth and a space shuttle go around the Earth?
So it's the space shuttle. I suppose you could have another space shuttle, but just name it Space Shuttle 2, I guess. The space shuttle was a rocket that NASA used before they scrapped it after a few accidents that happened sort of in a row, a few of them on national TV, which is very unfortunate. It was a rocket that essentially had a plane strapped to the side of it. Uh, that was the shuttle, and It had no launchable system, launch escape system, so if something went wrong with the rocket, it didn't have any means of getting away from it. So the crew was basically doomed from the start if something was going to go wrong. And that's sort of why they scrapped it. But it was a space plane that was designed for coming back to Earth, landing, and being fitted, being looked at, being checked, and being strapped basically straight back onto another rocket and launching again. It's what built the ISS because they could rapidly reuse it. They just put a bunch of different segments in, launched it many, many times, and assembled it in space. And that's why something as big as the ISS is up there in space. And as for it being on orbit, it's basically it's the same as any other spacecraft on orbit, but it just is designed to survive coming back and in one piece. I know that every crew capsule is designed to come back in one piece, but the shuttle had wings, which allowed it to glide back once it was done re-entering. It glided back onto a runway and landed. It was quite the heavy aircraft, so it was, I guess, spacecraft, aircraft. It's sort of both, I guess, but it was quite heavy, so it had the longest runway to ever land any aircraft. And if it missed, it didn't have any fuel on it. That's what the big orange tank behind it was. Or I guess underneath it, it was sort of
Yeah.
facing up. Underneath it, the big orange tank was actually the fuel for the engines on the shuttle. And as it's gliding back, it's a glider. It's a very heavy glider. It has no fuel. But if it missed the runway, then there was a problem there. And sort of a fun fact, the little grooves that are in roads sometimes to increase traction was actually invented. It was like a design invented by NASA to keep the shuttle going straight when it was landing because they had issues with crosswind. And since it couldn't take back off and go around, they had to come up with a new way to keep it going straight. And grooving the runway really worked. And now a lot of roads, a lot of off ramps in America have them. As you're getting off of, I guess they call it a highway. As you're getting off the highway and turning, you're turning at quite a high speed, so they need to keep you on the road. And they groove the roads, and they got that design from NASA from the shuttle mission.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That was a question, honestly, that I made up on the spot, and it's something that I actually wanted to know about. So yeah, no, it's I know there was a lot of unfortunate events with the space shuttle and space shuttle program, and I doubt there'll ever be something like that ever again. Or definitely not in the near future. Maybe once NASA or whatever space organization in the future will be might come up with a new design, maybe with a fail-safe sort of release and stuff like that, and maybe even engines for safer landings and stuff like that. And if it needs to break away, it has fuel in it for even if it's just a short flight, it can just get away from the rocket if anything goes wrong. So
Yeah, there is sort of an alternative, I guess you could class it as an alternative. The design for the space shuttle was that the upper stage, which was the plane, was reusable, which most rockets are not reusable. Once you use it, it crashes or it lands in the ocean and you cannot reuse it again. But Starship is, I know it's kind of a controversial company at the minute because of the CEO, but it is important to note that the Starship program is run by, I forgot her name, but it is run by a lot of people. It is designed by a lot of people. So I personally follow along the Starship program. I've watched every single launch. I really believe in the Starship program. I have a Starship patch from Flight 5, and they are really trying to do what the space shuttle was ultimately trying to do, which is full reusability. Because imagine every time you took off in a plane and landed, you had to scrap that plane, build a new one, and that's how you could get your next flight. It just is not sustainable. So a lot of companies right now are trying to build fully reusable rockets, which is a very difficult thing to do because of that re-entry heating. You're experiencing thousands of degrees Celsius, and that's what the shuttle really tried to work on with the heat shield tiles on the bottom of it. And Starship has sort of adopted that and has 18,000 individual hexagonal heat shield tiles that are designed for reuse over and over again. So there is sort of that um, second version of the shuttle in the form of Starship.
So, literally, the last few questions before we move on to our last section of this podcast. So, what is the heat shield made out of? So, to make it reusable and just to make it heat resistant. And then I'll ask my other question after that.
The exact material for Starship's heat shield is actually unknown. It's not something that they've made public because they are the only ones with the exact type. I can't remember the exact name because it's like just the sciencey name for it. But there is one that is sort of the standard, and different tweaks can be made to it. It'll be on the screen if we can find the name of it. But different tweaks can be made to the material itself just to make it more or less heat resistant, depending on what you're going for. And it's very likely something similar to that. And it's quite the interesting material because you can blast like a blowtorch to it, and when you lift it off, give it 5 seconds and you can touch it. It really good at dissipating that heat.
So yeah, my literal final question is how many successful sort of flights and like re-entries and all that has like Starship done? Has it I know it's I saw a video of it being caught unmanned, completely unmanned flight being caught within the sort of towers that collect it. Is that the first time or has it happened before?
So Starship is a very experimental program. It's only done 12 flights, and to say that it has had 12 successes and or 12 failures would be just a lie. I know that it's not gone orbital yet, but it hasn't tried to. And that's what a lot of people get wrong when they say it's failed to reach orbit. It hasn't. It never tried to go orbital. It is currently in the testing phase, and the first flight is one that a lot of people would definitely consider a failure. It made a 15-foot wide crater in the floor. It ripped up the launch pad, but they just didn't expect that to happen. They had 33 of the world's most powerful rocket engines firing straight at concrete, but they did not expect it to make such a big crater. So it threw a lot of debris up into the engines. A lot of the engines cut out, and then at the end, it started doing backflips. So it's not it's not the most successful mission for the first one, but it really improved with the second one. All 33 engines lit. I could go through every single flight that they did, but
Yeah.
I'll just go through the key ones. Flight 2 was much more of a success. It didn't make it to where it wanted to go, but it made it way further than the last flight, and that's basically sort of the pattern for Starship flights. Just make it a bit further than the last one, just to see what breaks, if something new breaks, what needs to be fixed, and it really started taking off. No pun intended. I didn't actually mean to that. Around Flight 5, which was the first ever booster catch attempt, and that's basically where the booster that takes the top part of the rocket to nearly at space, turned around, came back, and they caught it as it was lighting its engines to decelerate. They caught it in two. They call them the chopsticks, which I think is very good name for them. They caught it in the chopsticks. I'll actually get the patch down now. They caught it in the chopsticks. It's going to be blurred. It's the Mechazilla, which is what they call the launch pad. The Mechazilla chopsticks, and that was the first time that an orbital class booster had ever been caught, as opposed to just landing on legs. It was the most powerful booster to ever be caught. And it was only the second rocket booster to ever successfully return to Earth without any damages, and the first one that did that was also SpaceX with the Falcon 9, but that one has 9 engines. This has 33 and is over 100 meters tall by itself. So it technically classifies as a skyscraper if it was a building of that exact same height. So they basically got a skyscraper out of the sky. And as for the rest of the flights, there was a few what you could consider failures when they moved the top portion, which is called the ship. Um, they changed the ship type to from V1 to V2, which is just a more upgraded version. But the first few flights of that did have a few failures, as it was very much untested. They hadn't done a whole lot of testing on it. So the first one, it blew up not long after it separated from the booster. The booster's missions are basically routine at this point. They go up, come back, get caught if they want to keep the booster, or if they don't want to keep it because they don't need it anymore, they'll just land it in the ocean, and then what they actually do is shoot it to make it sink quicker, which is something very unique to Starship and SpaceX. But the ships now have deployed dummy payloads. It has a bit like a Pez dispenser, is what a lot of people refer to it as. The door opens and it sort of moves them down and shoots them out. And it has now deployed dummy payloads twice, and in the next month we'll see flight 13, I believe, 13 or 14, which is quite the improvement of flight. It is on the second launch pad, which has never flown a rocket before. It is with the new V3 engine, which has never flown before. It is with the new V2 booster, which has never flown before, and it is with the new V3 ship, which has also never flown before. So new engines, new booster, new ship, new launch pad, which I think will make for a very interesting and nerve-wracking flight for this rocket. So I can't wait.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I wish we could talk more about this, but we do not want this being a repeat of last week's podcast being 3 hours long. I think it ended up being about 2.5 hours long at the end, or something like that. But yeah, we've decided to keep it now between 1 and 2 hours, mainly on the lower end of that. So we're going to move quickly on to part 3 of this podcast. So we do recommend watching this on YouTube. There will be visual guides throughout the episode, being with pictures, videos, and maybe even descriptions as well. So yeah, we do really recommend watching on YouTube, but Apple Podcasts and Spotify also works. I believe we did also mention this last week, but I just want to mention it again just to remind anyone who's joining us this week, or if you didn't hear that bit last week. So now we move on to my personal favorite bit for this week, which is Takeoff Thursday, because we have some very, very good announcements this week, which include a lot of aircraft from the German military, which we talked about in our promo, which actually is releasing on the same day as we're recording this, so that's great. So we're starting
In
off
20 minutes time.
in 20 minutes' time, yeah, hopefully. So we start off with the German Tornado, which is what every aviation fan wants to see. You always want to see a tornado. And this is the first time I will ever be seeing a tornado flying. I don't think I've ever seen one. I've seen one in museums, but I've never seen one like static at an air show. I've never seen one flying at an air show. So it's gonna be this is the thing that I really, really am hoping to see when we go this year. So Joey, do you want to take us through some of the stats about this aircraft? So like the speeds and like the climb rate and sort of the stuff that we'd usually talk about.
Yeah, so this is quite the quick aircraft with a max speed or top speed of 921 miles an hour or 800 knots, or if you use kilometers per hour, 1,482 kilometers an hour. And you mentioned you've never seen it. I've also never seen it, so I can't wait to see this. Which is Mach 2.2 times the speed of sound, which is quite incredible for an aircraft that was made in the 70s. Between the 1979 and 1998, which is when it was manufactured. So for an aircraft that was made in the 1970s, it is quite quick.
Yeah, I mean, aircraft these days are even slower than that. So for it to be Mach 2.2 just over two times the speed of sound back in the 1970s, late 1970s, is incredible. But that was sort of the jet age, the golden jet age, I'd say. It's when the best jets were made, the fastest jets were made. I know there are probably faster ones now, but I think the ones just back then were so much cooler. I mean, I love the Typhoon, which we'll be getting onto next, but I also love the Tornado. I love the Buccaneer, the Jaguar, and all these British aircraft like that. You also have the English Electric Lightning, the English Electric Canberra as well. All these aircraft made in Britain. You think of our Air Force these days, we have the F-35, the Typhoon, things like that, like the Vulcan, the Nimrods, the V bombers and V aircraft, the Victor as well. That was just the golden age of the of the RAF for me. But we're getting a bit off topic with the RAF. We're going to the German Air Force here. But yeah, so they used the IDS version, which there was 745 of them made. There was 51 ADV Tornado ECR versions and 194 ADV versions. So yeah, quite a lot of aircraft made. If you think about these days, there's probably about 600, maybe 700 Typhoons in total made out of all of them. So across England, Germany, Italy, Spain as well also have some Typhoons. So yeah, there's quite a lot of these aircraft made, and it is definitely one of the coolest aircraft ever, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's fairly recently retired from the RAF in only 2019, which is really unfortunate. I would love to have seen
Yeah.
this still flying today for the RAF, but we do get to see it in air shows, so that is always a positive.
However, the Germany are retiring in the coming years, like the A-10s. There is a aircraft that does, or is being slowly phased out of service. Obviously, we retired it in 2019. Germany is one of the only, if not the only, nation to still fly the Tornadoes. I personally think it's an amazing aircraft. But as we get these more advanced avionics that we can't really put in the Tornado, or it's too expensive, it's more expensive to put these new avionics in than it is to just get a brand new Typhoon F-35, something like that. So yeah, it's a bit unfortunate they are being retired, but me and Joey, hopefully, as long as weather dependent, service dependent, all this sort of we'll be seeing those this year, and hopefully it will be an amazing display for us to see. So moving on to our next sort of weather aircraft, like I said, the Typhoon. I think it's very cool that we can relate these to the weather as well, because obviously tornadoes. That's what me and Joey like as well. So it's good that we like the plane. Typhoons. Well, we love the jet and the weather as well. So it's just something that yeah we can really sort of talk about a lot because it's something that we really enjoy both together rather than it's sort of being, obviously I was this week Joey was talking a lot, like last week I was talking a lot, so it's something that now we can both sort of talk about together.
Yeah, the Typhoon is one of my personal favorite aircrafts, if not my favorite aircraft, especially with the blackjack livery from a few years
Yes.
ago for the RAF display team. Um, and
Now keep talking. I'm just getting a model out of my model
yeah,
cabinet again.
um, and it is definitely one of the best displays. And well, there is multiple displays. There's the RAF one, there is the Spanish one, which went to Riyadh last year. There is the German one, which also is going to Riyadh this year, and it's definitely just one of the best aircraft for displays, in my opinion, or just in general, in my opinion. It's great to get pictures of. It's quick, it's loud, it's it's just all round one of the best aircraft, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree. And this is Blackjack here, so this is the Blackjack model. I forgot to put no, I did put an F-35 picture up last week. So, but yeah, that one is a lot more delicate. It's got so many parts on it. This one, the landing gear, and that comes out, and but this is also very delicate. So I mean, trying to be careful here while showing you the beautiful Union Jack livery on here. So obviously you've got the top as well. So it's a very, very beautiful livery. Probably my favorite livery ever. It's a very much it's in high detail. It's just such a this is probably my favorite model that I have out of all the models that I have. So it's a good thing that I had that on hand there that I can just get that on my display cabinet and show you how beautiful of an aircraft this really is.
Yeah, the blackjack is actually what got me into photography. I'll see if I can find the picture, but I was on top of the sand dunes in front of Blackpool Airport runway, taking pictures, zoomed in fully on my phone, through binoculars of blackjack, trying to get a good picture, and I had it as my phone background for like a year, and that's what really got me into photography because I saw that and I was like, I could do so much better than that, and I got a camera with a big lens,
Yeah.
and I was just zooming in on all these planes, and then they stopped doing the blackjack. So I was quite annoyed that I started photography after the blackjack, but we got typhoons like Moggy as well,
Yeah.
so I didn't miss out entirely, but I did miss out on blackjack.
Yeah, I sort of missed out on both of them, unfortunately, because I wouldn't say missed out, but I did have my the EOS 2000D with the 70 to 300 millimeter from Canon, which is like we discussed last week, is not the best lens in the world, unfortunately. So it wasn't the highest quality photos, very dark, very soft, and not the best photos ever. And then Moggy, my camera decided to uh well, it just decided that it wouldn't want to take pictures anymore when I was trying to, so it just would not lock onto anything. Honestly, I was at no, not Blackpool, sorry, Bournemouth Air Show, when Moggy was displaying. Luckily, it did get some pictures of Moggy. Very grainy, very noisy, not very good photos. I'll tell you that. But yeah, my camera just decided they didn't want to lock onto things like the Vigan and the Draken, which was yeah, that was a horrible experience. I tried taking some pictures of the Vigan. It's the first time I've ever seen that aircraft at Bournemouth. I've seen the Draken before, which I do have some good photos of now, luckily. But yeah, I was very upset when I couldn't get very many good pictures of Moggy because it only did flyby on the way to Exeter, I believe, at Midlands Air Festival. And yeah, it was. I do have one good photo actually, so I'll put that up on the screen if I can find that. But yeah, it was such a shame that I sort of missed out on both of those beautiful liveries. But it's so nice that I got a model. My dad actually has a model of Moggy as well, so it's literally the exact same as that. It's just got the one that I just showed, but it's just got the Moggy livery on it.
Yeah, I have one or two decent pictures of Moggy. I don't think I ever really got one of those proper money shots of Moggy. I've
Yeah.
got money shots of the standard display Typhoon, but none really of Moggy or any of the fancy liveries. I'm hoping that they do a fancy livery within the next few years, but most of my great pictures of the Typhoon are just the standard grey display Typhoon.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find the photo on my phone of the Moggy picture. Yeah, Moggy picture here. I'll put it up on the screen as well. Obviously, if I can't find it on here, but yeah, it was just such an amazing display. I always love to see the Typhoon display all the time, and it's just honestly probably one of my. It probably is the most my second favorite aircraft, right after the Vulcan, Avro Vulcan. As I say, I found the photo here, so let me zoom in a little bit on this. So it's not that you won't be able to see it in the best quality, but here is my the sort of money shot on Moggy. That's my favorite shot that I have got. I might post it on my Instagram. I'm not too sure. Like I said last week, we don't always post on Instagram. It's just sort of what we prefer to post. But yeah, this is the very beautiful picture that I got of Moggy. My favorite shot ever. Probably. So yeah, no, I did get a few of Moggy overall, but yeah, none too good of blackjack, unfortunately.
Yeah, so to get a little bit onto the stats of this aircraft, it has a max speed of Mach 2 at altitude, which is when it's at cruising altitude,
Yes.
but at sea level it has a Mach speed of Mach 1.25, just because there's a lot more friction, a lot more drag at lower altitudes. It can't quite get up to speed that it can get at altitude. But that is caused that speed is got by the thrust with afterburner at 180 kilonewtons, which is very powerful, and a lot of aircraft have much lower thrusts than that. It is very powerful, and that's at 90 kilonewtons per engine, which is what gives it that raw power and
Yeah.
raw noise you see in air shows.
Yeah, so we're going to move on to our next announcement. Well, it's sort of two announcements together. All of these aircraft from Riyadh are from the German Air Force, Army, and Navy. So we also have two NH90s, which we spoke about last week from Belgium. One being a flying display, one being a static display. So there'll be two helicopters, both from the German Army, I believe. There's also two more helicopters, one being from the Air Force, one being from the Navy. The Sea King, basically the German Sea King, also known as the Sea Lynx, uh, is uh, is going from the German Navy, and then you also have the Sikorsky CH-53G from the German Air Force. So in total, four helicopters from the German Air Force will be attending the air show, with three being static and one being a flying display. Now we're not going to get into too many details about the NH90. We did briefly speak about it last week. But we'd like to talk about more about the flying aircraft we haven't spoken about before, being the Typhoon and the Tornado. Let us know though if you do want us to talk about more in depth about these helicopters. Me and Joey both don't particularly know a whole load about helicopters. We're mainly on the fast jet, especially Joey. He's mainly on the fast jet side of things, while I also enjoy the civilian planes as I live near Leon Solent, like I said, so smaller aircraft like that. They also are bringing the Airbus A400M, which we have spoken about as well. We brought that up during the Midlands discussion. We sort of compared it to the Hercules. We also compared it to the Turbo Firecat with the turboprop engines. They've also bought an A321, which is basically they've just militarized a passenger aircraft. It's mainly sort of for it's basically like our Voyager. So we use an A330. It's mainly for like government and royal transport, as well as like chief executives and all the high up people in the army, and also just for like meetings and stuff, so like Air Force One. Like Trump, who's the president at the moment, will go on that and he'll have like meetings there. He might have interviews there, sort of stuff like that. So yeah, it's a very big announcement, and me and Joey are both very excited to see all the aircraft coming here.
Yeah, I would personally say that this is the best announcement so far for RIA, the best Takeoff Thursday, and I cannot wait to see all of these aircraft at RIA. It's going to be quite the year.
It is, but yeah, we don't. Like I said, we don't want this to be too long, so we're going to move swiftly on to our next announcement, which is the Royal Air Force Grob Tutor going to Hampshire Air Festival. So we usually see that in Midlands, so hopefully it'll be attending Midlands this year. Always a beautiful display to see, and hopefully it'll be in its Bumblebee livery, so the yellow and black livery. Always a beautiful livery to see. We saw that in Midlands for the last few years, so hopefully they do bring that to Hampshire as well. If not, they do announce the Bumblebee at Midlands because that's something that I always want to see. And the Tutor is basically just the training aircraft for the United Kingdom for the RAF. It's basically the first stage that you go in, so you learn all the instrument flying, navigation, basic fighter maneuver, very basic fighter maneuvers in the terms of you literally do like loop the loops and barrel rolls, some quarter clovers, and just very basic maneuvers before you move on to the next aircraft. So, Joey, what do you think of the Grub Shooter?
It frequents Blackpool Air Show every year. I've got some somewhat okay pictures of it. I don't have the best pictures of it, but I've got some decent pictures of it. It's quite a unique display because it's a propeller aircraft from the RAF, a light aircraft as well. So it is always good to get pictures of because it's not something that you see every day. I know that where I am, I see them somewhat frequently, but it's just not something you see every day. Just seeing these trainer aircraft doing routines like that, so it is a good display to see.
And luckily, it's not too hard to take photos of. Like you said, it's a very slow-moving aircraft. It's something that you can get, hundreds of photos of as it's going past, and there's nothing wrong with that. I love light aircraft, and I think it's a beautiful display. And some people might disagree, which is fair enough. But my opinion is, I love all types of aircraft, and light aircraft are just sort of my home. As like I said, I live near Leon Solent, so yeah, no, it's a beautiful display. It's a very elegant display, I must say. And I met the team last year. I do have actually their signatures in my interview in my signature book, which will be in my camera bag, which I bring to air shows every year. So yeah, no, it's a beautiful display, and I look forward to seeing that at Hampshire. So, our last announcement overall for this week, which was announced a few hours ago actually, is the RAF Falcons parachute display team. I've seen them a few times as well before. They went last year as well. I have some of their signatures. Joey, have they been to Blackpool? I know the Red Devils usually go to Blackpool, but I'm not too sure about the Falcons.
Yeah, I don't believe that they have been to Blackpool. I know the Red Devils have been. I've got some great pictures of them, but I've never seen the RAF Falcons.
Yeah, the RAF Falcons. Well, the Falcons are basically the RAF's parachute display team. The Red Devils are the armies. I'm not too sure about the navies. I'm mainly into the RAF, obviously, as we like planes. But yeah, I think the navy do have one, but I'm just not too sure what they're called. Joey, do you know what they're called?
Nope.
Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, it's just a nice parachute display team. It takes up a good chunk of time. You wouldn't think, but they basically deploy the parachute as soon as they're out the door. But I think they have about 3 seconds of free fall, they say, before they open the parachute. And they do like swirls in the skies. They do like the heart. They usually do stack. So a stack is basically just one guy hit, so he'll be in his parachute be over there, and then a guy lands on his parachute, and just basically just stands on his parachute, and they're all like attached and everything. And it's something really cool to see. And then I remember Wings and Wheels. I mentioned Wings and Wheels many times before. I remember there's a parachute. They land on each other and they split just before landing. And it's such an elegant display. I love the parachute display team. And they use one of my favorite aircraft. Usually the Trilander. I'm not sure if they use that anymore. But they used to any turboprop plane. I just love the sound of. It's such a nice aircraft, and the sound is just immense. You can hear it from miles away, and you can always track it around in the sky. And yeah, I mean, last year these guys basically cleared they got the sun out. It was very murky and very cloudy and very cold all day. And when they came in, there was a massive blue sky, and they managed to get their display in.
Yeah, I believe the RAF Falcons were actually scheduled for Riyadh last year, but the day I went, it was relatively rainy, so they didn't actually perform that day. So I did miss out on that, but I am going to Midlands Air Festival this year with you, so
Yes.
I can't wait to see them.
Yeah, so me and Joey going on a Sunday at Midlands Air Festival. Make sure you come find us. So I'll be there until about 4 o'clock probably on the Sunday. However, I'll be there all day Friday, all day Saturday, and then I'll be meeting up with Joey, and hopefully we can go interview some of the crew, like the BBMF crew. They're always there, so we can go get some. We can try and get some pilot interviews as well, maybe with the commentators or at some point as well. I know I spoke to a lot of the commentators for quite a long time last year, so it's. Yeah, it's something that we're really excited about, and it's this will be the second air show uh, within the last year that we've met up. So it'll be something really interesting. We have also got a flag now that we'll be putting in the ground next to us, so it's even clearer if you couldn't see all the merch and everything that we have on as well. So yeah, come say hello to us at Midlands Air Festival. We'll be happy to have a chat to you.
Yeah, we might be a little bit awkward because, well, we are not exactly the oldest. We're not that experienced. We've never had anyone come up to
Yeah.
us before, so we might be a little bit awkward at first, but I'm
And
sure it'll
we
be
are
fine
also
after a
in this
few minutes.
slipstream enclosure, so we are in a. So it's not locked away, and it's something you can still talk through. But it's just sort of a thing. So we will be in the middle of the crowd line. Basically, there's a little box called the slipstream enclosure. I usually stand at the back of the box anyway, just so I can get sort of a better angle on the planes. Because if you stand forward, you're literally like this. Like you're literally looking like the planes basically fly directly above you. So I stand at the back usually, and it takes away a little bit of the zoom on the camera, but it also makes me get better angles. So literally just come up to us, say hello to us, and we'll be happy to have a little chat with you, and maybe even give out some freebies as well.
Yeah, I know we'll be going there with a lot of well, a couple of keychains, a couple of pens maybe. So we'll be happy to give you them.
Yeah, exactly. And any donations welcome, but it's not something that we're too fussed about. It's mainly only the t-shirt and jumper as Joey's got on that we're mainly fussed about, as that cost quite a bit of money to make. So yeah, we do hope have enjoyed this podcast this week. This is going to wrap it up. So Joey, do you want to do your weekly 2 minute recap?
Yeah, so we went over quite a lot of the Iran war with the E3 Sentry getting destroyed, the KC-135s and the Reaper drones. We then talked about the UK doing sorties around RF Akrotiri and Cyprus with destroying almost 100 drones. We talked about the F-15 pilots that are straight back into service, straight back getting up flying. We talked about the F-15 trying to gun down a Shahed drone. We talked about the airlines being destroyed at Mehrabad Airport. We talked about the AN-32B, which was damaged at Baghdad International Airport. We talked about a possible Saudi Arabian drone shot down by Iran. We talked about the A-10s arriving at RAF Lakenheath. We talked about the
There we go.
airspace,
Yeah,
that's the word. We
airspace
talked about the
closure. Yeah.
airspace being closed in Spain and France. We talked about the Ukrainian interceptor drones being used in Iran. We talked about the Russia versus Ukraine drone situation. We talked about the Su-34 being shot down. We talked about the AN-26 crashing near Crimea. We then talked about the F-35 crash in Nevada. We moved on to the weather with the red sandstorm sweeping through Greece and Libya, and the we briefly mentioned the one in Australia as well. And then we talked about the radar glitch that happened across America. And then we moved into the space news, which was the main event with Artemis II. We also talked a little bit about Starship as well. I
Yep.
hope that one day we'll be able to do like a full episode dedicated to Starship because it is something that I have been following the entire time, and I I personally believe is what's going to take us back to the moon and maybe even further. And then we talked about the massive takeoff Thursday with 8 aircraft and three of those being flying displays. We talked about the Hampshire Air Festival announcement, and then we talked about the Midlands Air Festival announcement. So it's been quite a packed episode, and
And
it's
luckily,
been
yeah, we made it
hopefully
to be a bit
yeah
shorter this week, haven't we?
yeah
So it's not
yeah
too
I was just
bad.
about to say that.
It's about an hour and 40 minutes long. I probably could get that down to about an hour and 30 after editing. So it's a lot smaller of a podcast this week. And we get that we might not be able to, people might not be able to get to the end, which is completely fine. But as long as you got to the space bit, that's the main bit we hope you got to, and we hope you have enjoyed. Make sure you check out our merch on our Instagram and our pinned video. Make sure you DM us if you want any of that. All of our links are in our link tree in Instagram, TikTok, and yeah, you can probably just search up the display line on Google or Safari or Internet Explorer or something like that, just to find our link tree. So yeah, we do hope you've enjoyed this week. We've made it a lot shorter, but a lot more packed and a lot more interesting, hopefully, than last week. So yeah, we're still learning, and hopefully I'll be getting a better mic for the upcoming week. So we hope you enjoyed, and we will not see you next week. We'll see you the week after. So take care, everyone.